Hi. So who of you were here last year for my talk last year? So, okay, last year's talk was rough. It was called You Don't Stand a Chance. As you can probably infer from the title, it was not a very optimistic, hopeful talk. It was kind of brutal. I want to kind of reassure you, I'm not going to do that again today. I want to talk about something a bit smaller, and I kind of want to do it in a fireside chat. So it's going to get kind of, our logo is a bear on fire. So good. Anyway, my name is Rami Ismail. I'm one half of Dutch independent studio Vlambeer. That's me. Does anybody want this intro? No? Everybody knows who I am and doesn't want me to explain that? 0 hands, wow. Okay, well, here's the very first version then. This is the other guy. We made some games. We ate some noodles, we made some games. There was explosion, shooting, talking, shooting. New York Times? Shooting, awards, shooting. Hi. So, I have a question for you. I'm gonna need you to take this mic. I was wondering something. So I do a lot of things. I travel a lot. I talk to a lot of people, and doing that, I learn a lot of things about the industry. And I was wondering, what if we do this the other way around? I want you to ask me questions, and I will answer them. I will answer whatever question you have. Ask me anything.
Hi.
Hi.
Are you ever going to make a game that doesn't involve shooting, but something like love?
So we tried. We tried to make a fishing game.
Dinosaur Zookeeper.
That actually had a gun as well. And we did Yeti Hunter, which also had a gun. There's one game we did without guns, and it was called Glitch Hiker. And it was interesting because it was a game that died, so you can't play it anymore. The one Vlambeer game without guns is no longer playable. Sorry.
Hello.
Hi.
I want to know, what did you have for breakfast? And what was the design decision behind that?
So it was actually not really my choice. I had a steak with asparagus and gnocchi, and I had that because that's what the airplane offered. I flew in this morning from Austin, so I'm also a little bit jet lagged. But yeah, there was not a lot of choice. The other one had pork, and I can't have pork because I'm Muslim. So, anybody else?
Hi, Rami.
Hi.
Other side.
Was
two questions.
Whoa.
Was it
whoa.
my turn? What's going on? Yeah. I actually it's my turn. Is it?
All right, we'll start there.
Yeah, I actually want to ask what your inspiration was for the logo.
So if we ever find the person that drew it, we'll ask him. That drawing was not made by me or JW. In fact, it was found in JW's notebook after, I think he went to a party. And we assumed the person that drew it was really drunk because they made a pun. They wrote the word Vlambeer above it with an F because they thought that, putting a bear on fire would be funny. Which we don't condone that. We don't condone animal violence, obviously. But yeah, we needed a name and a logo, and that sounded awesome, so we went with it. If we ever get sued by this person, I'll ask them what the inspiration was.
So you're of course 50% of Vlambeer, and I was wondering if you would have to do it on your own, what would be the game you would always want to make?
Oh God. I have so many. So I have this theory that any idea that I've already had has been in my mind for so long that I've built up too much resistance to actually doing it. It's a theory called idea depth, and I strongly believe in it, that all the game ideas I had before Vlambeer, before this like cooperation between me and JW started, are like 6-7 years old, and by now I think they've reached like mythological status in my head. So I think I don't actually spend time thinking about that, which is kind of exciting. I should actually spend some more time thinking about what I would like to make on my own, but for now it's a really good way of working with JW, and I just work that way. Oh, you know what? You figure it out.
Every single game you have made is in 2D. Have you any aspirations to do 3D games?
Well, Gun Gods wasn't 3D. It was like Doom style 3D. But yeah, no, like the reason we end up with pixel art every single time is because we make arcade games that are very much about precision. And because they are very much about precision, we like the binary of pixels. Like you know, pixels either overlap or they don't overlap. And if they do overlap, you got hit. And if you don't overlap, you did not get hit. So it's not as much that it's an aesthetic choice, it's just a purely practical choice. Pixels communicate our style of gameplay like perfectly. While with a 3D model, like do they clip? Do they, you know, are they? A lot of 3D games actually have to fake collision just to make it feel right. So that's not really our style.
Hello. I was wondering, how do you test if an idea is viable to pursue, besides the usual way of playtesting? Like, how do you know if it's worth your time?
So this is actually very unique to me and JW, is that me and JW don't like each other, right? Like our entire studio is built on the idea that me and him are opposite people with opposite interests, with opposite likes, with opposite everything. So the way we figure out something is worth pursuing is we see if both of us like it. And that barely ever happens. And if it does, we do the usual thing, which is playtesting. And then if we playtest it and we enjoy making it, right, we enjoy working on it more than that we enjoy playing it, then we make it. Because, you know, working on a game is very different from playing a game, obviously. So for us, it's important that we enjoy making it more than anything else.
I had a question myself, actually.
Yeah.
So I remember, like, pre-Vlambeer, actually. Originally, I think you and a couple of other students at HKU created, like, a large team to initially work on AAA type games, right? So what happened there, and how did you, well...
Oh, do we have, like, dramatic music? Like, does somebody have a violin? No, it's true. One of the last things I did at the HKU before Vlambeer started was we pulled together this team of people to make a game for Xbox Live Arcade. That was our goal, was to make an Xbox Live Arcade game. This was in 2009, I guess?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it was 2009. Like, Braid had just come out, and like Xbox Live Arcade was the big thing. So we reached out to Xbox Live Arcade, and we created this prototype for a space dogfighting game. And the team got way too big because I had no production experience. So I was just, oh, you're good. Like, let's go. So I ended up with like 20 people, which was way too big. But we actually did get the game into the greenlight process at Xbox, and they were actually interested in signing on it. But then we were second-year students. And for the third year, the schools in the Netherlands very frequently have external projects with external project owners. And it turned out I took 20 of the best students out of that pool, and the school didn't really like that because they needed good students to do the projects. So they had to kill it. So they killed it, and that basically killed my enjoyment in school forever. So then I decided to drop out. It was basically that project that made me decide, like, I want to do things now. And that's how things worked out.
Okay, cool.
Let's do like 2 or 3 more.
From the extensive intro, looking at the award ceremonies, the talks you do, the interviews, how much side activity is too much? Do you get enough time to spend on your own projects or basically on what you do?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. It's a question that we've struggled with a lot. So in our case, Vlambeer is kind of a very odd thing, especially now, but it's kind of this weird double line, right? Like you have the output we have in terms of game. In the first year, we made 16 games in 1 year, I think. And as we got bigger, I started doing more side things because I had more opportunity to do them, and I'm curious and want to learn about the industry and about the world. So with side things, he means I do a lot of traveling, I do a lot of public speaking abroad, I go to emergent territories and markets to see if I can help out or if I can create connections. I do a lot of like side projects, toolkits, initiatives, and they do take up a reasonable amount of my time, and that's absolutely true. The weird thing is, Vlambeer is very much in a state nowadays where that super focused game, like as a main part of our life, is not necessarily the way we want to make games. We want to be a bit more relaxed about it and a bit more have a life around it, because we did that weird thing where, and I think a lot of indies recognize this if you're like around 25 to 27, 28 years old, is that if you want to be an independent developer, you probably spend the majority of your 20s building a career. But because you're spending the majority of your 20s building a career, you forget to do the thing that most other people do in their 20s, which is learn to be a fucking human being. So by the time you're like 27, you're just like, oh, right, an apartment? Like, how does that work? And I literally had to learn like just very basic things at like 26, 27-year-old because I just hadn't spent time being a human. Yeah, so me and JW both decided that we wanted to spend a lot more time doing things outside of the core of Vlambeer, which is purely making games. So yeah, I think the side projects definitely take time out of development, but I think we're completely fine with that. There's just the main priorities that we have, like releasing a patch, which has taken priority over all of the travel. That was just really hard. But beyond that, we're pretty good with where we are. I'll take 1 or 2 more.
Yeah. Do you have some time to play my game after this?
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. I'll take 2 more.
Out of all the projects you've done, which one are you the most proud of, and why?
Okay, so there's 2 answers. So if your last project is not the one you're most proud of, something went horribly wrong, I guess. I'm super proud that we managed to finish Nuclear Throne, that managed to come out, that we worked on a game for 2.5 years, that we proved we could make a game of that skill. From the first moment Vlambeer was created, that type of project was always like a distant goal to make like a big release, right? But it was never our focus to make a big game. The other game that I'm super proud of is the game I mentioned before, which is Glitch Hiker, which is the game that died, which we made for the Global Game Jam of 2011. And the theme was extinction, and we made a game that ended up dying. So you can't play the game anymore, even though you can download it. It was such a weird, like, mess of an idea, but it came together so well that I'm still really proud to say that I created probably one of the few games that has ever died as part of the design, which is, you know, they turn off MMOs all the time, but that's not part of the design. That's just, we're not earning money anymore. Glitch Hikers was meant to die, and it got killed by a drunk Canadian.
One question?
One more. Yeah, because that question was, can you play my game?
Our teacher talks really a lot about you, and he asked us if you ever meet you, if you would still recognize him. His name is Joram Wolters.
Oh God, yeah.
Well, that doesn't sound like a good thing.
I remember Joram.
Great.
Yeah.
I will let him know.
Okay, good. I guess I'll take one more.
Okay.
Hey, Rami.
Hey.
This was actually a question that I had in mind for Mikkel from the last presentation, but I think it's also very interesting to hear from you. Do your games ever have, like, Inside has a really clear visual and game design premise or design vision, and we usually find out about our vision very late in the project. But I was wondering if you have those type of design teams, and how early or late in the development process you find out.
Yeah, Vlambeer is a very, very direct system-based studio, right? So we do a lot of systems that you can test very early. So we have an idea of our core loop very early, and because we have a very clear notion of what the core loop of our game is, we can very early decide on what the thematics are and what kind of like the essence statement of the game is, right? So if you've got, I don't know if I've ever talked about essence statements, but effectively, you know what a pitch is, right? Everybody knows what a pitch is? Like pitching your game, like a good, like 1 to 3 sentence explanation of what your game is so that people might be interested in hearing or playing about it. I'm jet lagged. I felt like the chair was falling. Was the chair falling? Wow. So an essence statement is effectively that, but not for externally. It's for your team. So for Ridiculous Fishing, for example, Ridiculous Fishing is a game about fishing with machine guns. You throw out your hook, and then you tilt your iPad or iPhone to avoid fish on the way down. And then if you hit a fish, the hook goes back up, and then you can catch as many fish as you want on the way back up by tilting again. And then when you hit the surface, your fisherman throws all the fish up into the air, and then your guy grabs a gun, and you shoot the fish out of the air before they hit the water again. And then you get money for that, and then that money you use to buy stuff, right? So the internal essence statement for Ridiculous Fishing was not to make a game about fishing with guns, or like there's a very thick social media theme. Like all of that was not relevant to what we were making. What we were trying to make was a game with an infinite positive feedback loop. So no matter what you did, we always wanted it to feel good because we were trying to make the best mobile game ever. And we had learned that people that play mobile games, they like getting rewarded for stuff, right? That's what everybody says, like Angry Birds, like get the 3 stars, get the explosions, get the confetti, like get the trumpet. Like the core idea is that people want to feel rewarded. So we wanted to make a game that always rewards you. So in Ridiculous Fishing, you can see that design choice from the very first moment. The very first moment you boot up the game, we made the game so that you could literally boot up the game and then just smack your iPad against your face, and then you would still get enough money to buy the first upgrade in the game, which is a hat. Like, there is no way to not do that. Like, you would have to intentionally not touch your iPad to not achieve that goal. And it's just, we wanted that to always be positive. So you go down, the deeper you get, the more fish you can get on your way back up. The more fish you get on your way back up, the more fish you can shoot in the air. The more fish you shoot in the air, the more money you get. The more money you get, the better upgrades you can get. The better upgrades you can get, the deeper you get. The deeper you get, the more fish. And it just goes on forever. That was our essence statement. That was what we were trying to make. And we decided on that very early. And then all the other themes came together very late. So it's a bit of both. Cheers. Okay. Can I have that mic back?
Yeah, sure.
So, that is really pretty. Should have dimmed the spotlights or something. So I asked for questions, and the reason I asked for questions is because, did any of you watch Elon Musk a few days ago? You all know who Elon Musk is? Elon Musk runs a company called Tesla, and he used to work on PayPal, and he also works on something called SpaceX. And SpaceX is this private company trying to revolutionize spacefaring. They want to make spacefaring accessible to people. And a few days ago, he explained his master plan to get humans to Mars. And he did that in an amazing presentation. The only problem with the presentation at the end of it was that at the end, he did a Q&A. And the questions he got were, can I kiss you? Would you work on a TV show to find the most expendable human on Earth to send to Mars? That was a real thing. Somebody asked him to sign a comic book, and I got really upset, because this is literally somebody trying to explain how we're going to get to Mars, and it's somebody who has proven that he can do completely ridiculous things with Tesla, right? So I wanted to hear your questions, and thank you to everybody who asked a question. I really appreciate it. I want to talk about bad questions. You've heard this, right? Who believes this? So we all don't believe this. You believe it? Okay. Why? But does that make it good? Okay, but the statement has nothing to do with human. It says there's no such thing as a bad question, just bad answers. Okay. Thank you. There's totally bad questions, right? And of course there are. The reason people say this, why would people say that? Because asking questions is putting yourself in a vulnerable state, right? If you ask a question, you could be seen as uninformed or dumb or not paying attention or whatever, right? Like asking a question, especially in a situation like this, is putting yourself in a really vulnerable state. And I wanted to have a photo of a scientist. So this is Albert Einstein. The reason I put this guy here is because he said something about questions that really resonated with me, which is he said, if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on getting it right, I would spend 55 minutes figuring out the proper question. Because if I have the proper question, I'm confident I can solve the problem in 5 minutes. So asking questions is really important, and there's a lot of things, like if you have me here on the stage, right? I travel, I've seen a lot of things, I've made a lot of games. There's a lot of things you could have asked me about that all would have been super relevant to what you're trying to do, right? You could have asked me about the sales figures for Nuclear Throne. You could have asked me about context, about certification. You could have asked me about the news. You could have asked me about discoverability in 2016. You could have asked me about Twitch, about cultural diversity, about public speaking, about how to avoid getting random checked at TSA. You could ask me, don't ask me about that. You could ask me about a lot of things, right? Now, when I do public speaking and I do a Q&A at the end of my talk, I usually get a number of types of questions, and I made a list of them. So the first type of question is the Google could have answered this question, which is a question I get a lot. It is the sales figures of Nuclear Throne. You've heard of Steam Spy, right? You can literally look up how much I made with Nuclear Throne right now on your phone. It would be very awkward. I need you to make me feel better, is a question I get a lot. The 3 magic steps to success is a question I get a lot. Questions asked in hindsight, or answers that don't really apply to me or you. And just to emphasize, like, I need you to make me feel better. That's usually when somebody made a decision that they're not 100% certain about. They think that if I have the same answer they have, that now they're good and things are safe. Because somebody with authority on a stage said that it was okay. You know? That's not how that works. You can't shift your responsibility to me by asking a question. Right? It's still your choice. Or the answer does not apply. A lot of people ask me, like, well, what did you do to market Nuclear Throne? And I could tell you, well, we reached out to our fans and we started a Twitch stream. And like that does not apply to you unless you have a fan base like Vlambeer does. Right? It's just not, you can ask me that, but it's completely, utterly useless to you. Another question I get very often, but I'm not going to talk about that one, is this one. I get that one a lot, where people give me like a 4-minute intro about who they are and what they do and where their Kickstarter is, and then they ask me what my favorite color is. But there's a trick to asking good questions, and it's important to ask good questions. And I want to, like, for a moment, I think I'm going to go over time, sorry. I want you to really understand how important asking questions is. It's the core of our job. Asking questions is the core of our job. Exploring questions is the hardest part of our job. Figuring out the right question is the hardest part. Figuring out your lines if you're an artist, the way you're going to tackle a programming problem, the way you're going to tackle a design problem, that's the heart of our question. And answering questions is so much easier than posing them. So if you have a question, you need to think about a few things that you want out of that question. So you can ask a question to add a perspective to your own. You can ask a question to get an answer for a fact. You can ask a question to be able to ask better questions or more questions. So here's one. What do I want? What do I want to learn and explore? Do you need an expert opinion? Do you need just an opinion, a threat to explore? Do you need a fact? Do you need an opinion? Like, what kind of what kind of answer do you want? And based on that, you can think about what kind of question you want to ask. Don't go down deep ends. So if you have a question that can be answered with yes or no, that's a bad question. Don't ask yes or no questions. It can be helpful asking several questions at once, with like the follow-ups kind of in there already, or preparing your follow-ups. And generally, you want to move from more generic questions to more specific questions. So you start broad, and then you home in on something. And the reason you do that is because you can guide somebody along your thought process. So if you have a certain idea of how things work, you can ask people questions and guide them along that same process so that they answer the question basically from the same spot you are, right? So you want to be better at following up. You want to be better at being reactive. Don't just ask questions. Listen to what the other person is saying, and then based on that. You need to get comfortable with silence. That was a silence. Silence is not bad. In fact, I could have filled that entire thing up with words. I could have gone, well, it's important that you think about like silence. I can also say it's important that you think about silence, right? They're different, and for some reason the silent one sounds better. More importantly, leaving silence at the end of somebody else's answer is important because they know they can follow up. So when somebody answers something, don't interrupt them. When they stop talking, don't immediately start talking. Don't be so eager to explore your route to the answer that you don't let them explore theirs. It'll give you better answers, so learn to get comfortable with silence. And then learn to rephrase. Very often, people are different and they treat questions differently. So some people just like questions. Some people need a declarative thing. So they need you to say, tell me about this, more than a question. If you're using jargon, listen to how the person answers. Try to use their words. If they speak with certain words, if they speak with certain jargon, use their jargon. Make them feel comfortable. Most of all, you want to create a safe environment. What is that for again? Man, what an amateur. Sorry. Google spent some time searching for the perfect combination of people to make an effective team, right? Now, Google is a very data-centric company. They base everything on data. And they were sure that if they spend enough time, enough surveys, enough research, that they would find the magic combination of skills and people to make an effective team. And you know what they concluded? That they were just dead wrong. It had nothing to do with the combination of people. The only thing that was important is that you were nice. Google concluded that. They concluded this, that the number one thing for being an effective team is creating a safe environment. And This is not a joke. In fact, most major industries have a huge focus on making sure people feel comfortable. I'm going to tell one more story. In 1977, the largest airplane disaster in the history of mankind took place. It was in Tenerife, and it included a KLM and a Pan Am flight. And what happened was a miscommunication between the pilot of the flight and the co-pilot. They miscommunicated, and the pilot thought it was okay to take off, while the co-pilot was trying to communicate that it was not. And the KLM sped down the runway and crashed head-on with a Pan Am flight that was still on that runway. It is still the largest airplane disaster in the history of mankind, where 2 airplanes were involved, because there were some others where not airplanes were involved. In response to that, the aviation agencies set up something called cockpit resource management. And basically all it is a way for people to ask questions nicely. They spent millions and millions of dollars on figuring out how to ask questions nicely. And what they recommended was you open your question by getting somebody's attention by using their name or their title. That was step 1. Then the second one is you state your concern without getting emotional about it. Then the third one is you state a solution that you have in mind. And the fourth one is you get buy-in from the other person. So you don't say, I think we're running out of fuel, we should reschedule to fly to this other airport. You say, I think we're running out of fuel, it might be good to divert to this other airport. What do you think, Captain? They spent millions and millions of dollars on figuring out a way to ask good questions and to give good answers. So when you're sitting there thinking about a question to ask, here or elsewhere, think carefully about what you want to ask. Don't believe that there's no bad questions. It's not bad to ask bad questions. It's fine to ask bad questions, but use those bad questions to practice, to iterate, to improve. Just like everything else, iterate on your questions, improve on your questions, get better at your questions. You'll be better at making games. Thanks so much.